Dr. Larry Madin, who is the Executive Vice President and Director of Research and Senior Scientist at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Dr. Madin received his bachelor's degree from University of California at Berkeley and his PhD from UC Davis, and he's been at WHOI since 1974. As Director of Research since 2006, Dr. Madin oversees the science departments and related research institutes and centers at WHOI. He's been active in the development of new international and industry partnerships and in the formation of the Center for Marine Robotics. Larry?
Thank you very much, Margaret. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially to follow the two distinguished speakers who preceded me. I'd like to make a few remarks today from the perspective of one of the many academic institutions that did participate in the Deepwater Horizon response, and talk about the way that now, 4 years after, we sort of view the pros and cons and the difficulties and the advantages and so forth of our becoming involved in that. As Jane said a moment ago, many in academia were contacted originally because they had connections in the government agencies, and certainly that was true for Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We were contacted within the first few days by NOAA, by the Coast Guard, by BP, by the White House, and within a matter of weeks we were beginning to mobilize to help in various ways that we could. I think that Woods Hole might be an unusual choice because we're not a Gulf state. For us, GOM means the Gulf of Maine, and we were quite a ways away from the action down here. But I think one of the characteristics of the Deepwater Horizon event is the depth of the accident. And this was a deep event from the perspective of the oil industry, but for us, with a long history of deep water exploration and technology, this was shallow water. And I think one of the reasons that Woods Hole was involved so early on was because of the nature of the location of this event and the way that we, with our experience, could assist with it. So in thinking about what brought us to this, I think we can identify a number of strengths that we think the academic community brings, that we think we as an institution brought to that I've listed here. First of all, that there was a broad base of knowledge founded in our basic research activity, whether it was exploring deep sea hydrothermal vent systems or deep sea biology or the chemistry of the ocean. We were what we might call pre-adapted by our history of basic research to respond quickly to a situation which was somewhat novel from the point of view of standard industry practice. We also had the ability to respond very flexibly and very rapidly. Now, Woods Hole may have been fortunate in that we don't have a lot of teaching obligations, and so people were able to get down to the Gulf without abandoning their classes. We also have a long sense of independence, and I think that all academic institutions bring this strength, that they can apply a lot of different types of expertise, but with a very independent approach to the science. But all of this was really motivated by a desire to serve and to help in whatever ways we could in this national incident, which clearly was stressing the ability of the normal response capability, and that there was room for people with some of the background that we had to participate. We think another strength is that the standards of peer review and analysis that come with academic work were appropriate, although clearly we sometimes run into conflicts with the timing of the release of information. And then there's some ability to work outside of government limitations, and I'll refer to another incident later on that illustrates that, I think. But there were a number of problems, and I think Jane described these very well in her remarks, that there certainly are going to be conflicts with other priorities of the incident having to do with the need for assuring safety, for the priority of containment, and also we are obviously, as academics, working in a more unfamiliar environment, regulatory environment. We're not accustomed to the types of restrictions that are necessarily in place in a situation like that. So the opportunity to be better prepared for that, as we just heard from Jane, would certainly be valuable. The inadequate funding mechanisms, we also recognize, although Woods Hole obtained a number of rapid grants, in fact, there was nowhere near the necessary amount of funding to carry through the full amount of analysis that was eventually needed. And then there are these different cultures and different expectations about how academia goes about its business, how industry goes about its business, government, and the media in particular. We found that there were conflicts that would arise between when people wanted to know things, when the media wanted to know things, when academic scientists are willing to say things and what they're willing to say. So briefly, what did we do? Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution submitted or presented about 100 people, more than 100 people, I think, went to the Gulf. Now, this is from an institution which does not have a long, major history or program in oil spill response, but we did do a lot of other things. And among those activities were participation in the flow rate technical group for measuring the flow, using P equipment that you see in the middle of the screen there, mounted on an ROV, the sampling of the wellhead that you see on the video, to take that sample of the oil as it came right out, impacts on coral, mapping of the plume, and many, many other projects, some of which are continuing to this day in analysis. Assets that Woods Hole provided down there included our underwater vehicles, the submersible Alvin, ROV Jason, an autonomous vehicle Sentry that you see on the lower left of the screen, and our vessel, the Oceanus. So in thinking back about how this all worked for us, we can sort of think about what were the rewards for an institution like ours of participating in this incident, and then what were the risks. And I'm happy to say that I think that the number of rewards here outnumber the risks, but there were some risks that we were not prepared for. Jane has referred to some of these also, and I think this is something that the academic community in general needs to be better educated about in order to allow them to participate and to contribute, but with a full understanding of what the situation is going to be. So I think that in terms of rewards, we did feel that we as an institution, just as many other institutions, were able to make valuable contributions to the crisis management, that it is a service to the nation, that because of our background and our capability, we're able to offer, that there were also very significant new scientific findings that came out of this and are still coming out of this, including technical operations. We did some pioneering work in the use of autonomous vehicles and underwater sensors that will continue to be valuable both to science and in other applications. We met many new colleagues, established new collaborations. We did uncover some new funding sources. Obviously, GOMRI is the most conspicuous of those, probably. But, and finally, I would say that for us as an institution, it created opportunities for further engagement with the industry, something that we might not have anticipated. The fact that we were able to contribute some new technology, some new knowledge to the situation in the Gulf, that we were able to interact with the industry, with BP and with other participants there, has led us now to a situation in which we can attempt to further that engagement and continue to provide what our institution can to the safe operations of that industry. But clearly there were some risks. For a lot of people, there was disruption in their work, in their personal lives, opportunities for other research. They missed deadlines. Everything got sort of disrupted, physical and psychological stress. And then in our case, one of the most significant consequences, I think, was that we became embroiled in legal action that we hadn't really expected. Some of you are familiar with the situation, but because we were involved in making a measurement of the flow rate, and because this was a critical figure for the calculation of the total amount of oil released and consequently the eventual damages assessed against BP, we found ourselves in a situation where a lot of our data was subpoenaed, and we engaged in a legal I wouldn't call it a fight, but a legal tussle for a period of some months on this issue. In the end, Woods Hole did surrender a large number of documents. We argued against this action on the basis that there is something called academic privilege, which protects the discourse among scientists before they are reaching their conclusions from being unfairly revealed and used in ways that might cast unfair aspersion on the results. So it was a long process. At the end of it, the legal process did turn over a lot of material. We were able to protect some of it, and we were able to make the argument that the issue of academic privilege did have validity, and that as a result of this action, other institutions were protected in some measure from similar legal activity. But it did leave a lingering concern with us about this risk, and I think that this is where the education of scientists so that they know what these risks are going into it is very important. The last example I want to mention is something completely different from the Deepwater Horizon, but another case where an academic group was able to carry out something that was not, could not be accomplished by conventional government means. And that was the opportunity to sample the radioactivity from the Fukushima accident, where a number of U.S. federal agencies were not able to support this, but between a coalition, pass my word, please. Thank you. Between a coalition of academic groups, international groups, and private funding from a foundation, we were able to mount an expedition that went out to measure all the dispersal of radionuclides in the Pacific Ocean. And I guess as a further example of novel ways of doing science, the analysis of these samples, including samples from Scripps, I believe, is now being financed by crowdsourcing. So there are ways that academia can operate outside of the normal government environment, but I think our experience has been that with preparation and with what we've learned from this event, Deepwater Horizon, we are better prepared to work both with government agencies and with other academics to participate in ways that add value that we think only the academia can provide in some cases. So, thank you very much.